In this video, I will explain the conjecture that the theory of everything searched for in physics is embodied by fundamental replicators that have been called Femes. So the idea is that fundamental reality, an interacting system composed of discrete information, embody fundamental replicators. These Femes interact to cause the laws of physics. So we gain the perspective that 4 abstract replicators exist in reality, not 3 as it's currently understood. Who am I and why do I care about this? This is Neil Turk.
I think that's impossible. So just as an example, I have an undergraduate with me who in Edinburgh, and he came to me 6 months ago.
On the intuition that the laws of physics could result from
evolution. 6 months ago, and he's been reading all kinds of crazy books. He's actually doing engineering physics, but he's read David Deutsch's book on something about impossibility. Beautiful probability or something. Yeah, something like that. It's an absolutely beautiful book, which I highly recommend. And we've been discussed complexity, actually making progress. Really difficult questions. I'm honest with him. You know, your chances of actually making progress are tiny, but it's incredible fun.
So I believe I've made significant progress on these ideas. In order to explain this, we will consider the problem of fine-tuning and problems with current solutions, then have a background on physics, computation, evolutionary theory, and constructor theory, and then go through the 5 predictions. So firstly, we consider the fine-tuning problem. The rest of the sections should be in the scroll bar. Sections 1 to 4, sections 2.1 to 2.4 are kind of introducing terms and ideas in constructor theory. Terms 5 to 7 are the ideas in constructor theory. Terms 8 to 10 are about evolution and universal Darwinism. Then we do the conjecture and predictions. Okay, so what is the fine-tuning problem?
Numbers. Now these numbers are fixed values of a fundamental physical condition we find in our universe. For example, the force of gravity or the expansion rate of the universe. Now here's the amazing part. Each one of these numbers are so perfectly precise and so balanced with one another that if any one of them were off, plus or minus the slimmest fraction, in some cases literally this much, there would be no life and no universe as we know it. For example, if the mass of a tiny little proton was just a tiny bit bigger, there'd be no hydrogen, which means no hydrogen stars, which means no carbon and oxygen made in those stars, which basically means no water and no biology. So it appears, to most physicists, not to all, that since the very beginning, the entire universe has been perfectly tuned for one thing.
Okay, so that introduces the idea that the universe, and more specifically the theory of everything in physics, has some specific form that facilitates the evolution of complex life. We do not currently have an explanation for why it would have that form. Introducing ideas that will be relevant later. The Wolfram Physics Project is a contemporary theory that has the perspective where general relativity and quantum mechanics are numerically reducible portions of the reality that results from interaction with the theory of everything. Theory of everything is a single equation or algorithm that describes the form and dynamics of reality at all scales. So the null hypothesis is just the idea that physics only needs to find the form of the theory of everything. It doesn't need to explain it. To question these explanations, we use Occam's razor. That is the idea that an explanation with the fewest assumptions is most likely to be correct. So the null hypothesis assumes the theory of everything existed with the current arbitrary form, and that information was instantiated at the point of the Big Bang with the form described in inflationary models. So the anthropic principle is the idea that many universes exist, and we exist in a universe that has these laws because it's only possible for us to exist in a universe that has these laws. But that actually just shifts where the fine-tuning principle exists, because even in an infinite multiverse, it can never generate all possible information structures. That is proven by Gödel's incompleteness and Chern's Holton problem. So in order for some multiverse to generate our reality, there needs to be constraints or assumptions about its form. This paper proposes the explanation that evolution in some space with these two properties, significant information exists and interaction is universal or Chern complete. This explanation aims to explain why the theory of everything and form of the universe existed at the beginning of time. So, background. This background discusses constructor theory by Deutsch and Morletto, who will be introduced shortly. Information is defined as anything with counterfactual potential. Counterfactual potential is the potential to be different. The example is the black square interacting with this function RuWhite to output a white square, where white represents false and black represents true. If you change the color of the square, the output is different. If you change the function to RuBlack, the output is different. Therefore, both the square and colored shit. This has been kind of racist. I don't know. Fuck it. Both the square and function interact to create the white square. Both the square and function constitute information. Interaction is where information creates an output structure that is causally dependent on the input information's form. The next idea is universality and Chern completeness. An AND gate is universal or Chern complete because it can be composed to form any output from any input. This is an example. These are AND gates being composed together to form an XOR gate. Then this shows how the input and output can be varied to whatever state you would like. Computational equivalence and interoperability by Deutsch and Wolfram refer to the fact that reality embodies universal operators, meaning that we can carry out any possible computation given sufficient memory and time. Thirdly, we have systems. Systems are anything where information interacts repeatedly. The example being the square interacts with a function asking its color. These are equivalent representations of interaction. A structure is information of some finite description, and the environment is the information that some structure interacts with. The next part is on abstraction and emergence. Emergent structures can interact to cause notable transformations that do not exist in the constituent information. The example here is the glider. This is a glider. It is an object on the cellular automata that interacts with the function game of life. The game of life updates the state of a square dependent on the number of neighbors that are colored. Then, apologies if I give off racist vibes. The state of the system can be understood by saying this structure moves square root 2 grid cells diagonally every 4 directions. That's a property that does not exist in the constituent information, and that is what defines the glider as an abstract object or structure. Numerically reducible by Wolfram and tractable by Deutsch refer to the fact that the future state of a system can be predicted by less computationally expensive means than just running the fundamental rules. That is because of abstract objects and their properties when they interact. That's section 1 to 4. Section 5 to 7 are the meat of constructor theory. I will let Deutsch and Marletto introduce it themselves.
They were
This is David Deutsch.
quantum physics, which is my actual field, and then the theory of evolution, the theory of computation, and the theory of knowledge, which is usually not even considered part of science, but those were the 4 strands.
Just seeing that for the first time, one's impression on these are each important things, but they're
fundamental is that if you think of any kind of transformation of a physical system, from hot to cold, or from a block of marble into a statue and so on, if you think about all possible transformations that are permitted by the laws of physics, the overwhelming majority of those are only happen if the right knowledge is present. So from the point of view of what can be transformed into what, it's practically all the theory of what knowledge can do. And that is why knowledge is a fundamental thing in
And this is Marletto.
And trajectories and initial conditions takes statements about what tasks or transform laws and trajectories and initial conditions takes statements about what tasks or transformations are possible and what are impossible and why as fundamental ones. And then it derives explanations about the rest from those statements taken as fundamental. So this is a very powerful switch, and it can achieve a number of very interesting things all in one go, just because you change the model explanation. We can capture phenomena that with the traditional conception we could only capture in approximative ways. So these are phenomena related to information, phenomena related to life, so regularities that underlie production and organization of information within biological systems, and phenomena that have to do with work and heat. And then another thing can happen. There is this problem that we don't have yet a unique proposal for a successor for both quantum theory and general relativity, because these two theories that are the most fundamentals we have at the moment clash with each other. And there are some regimes where experimentally both are important.
So knowledge is any structure that tends to remain in an environment once it is instantiated. Constructor theory focuses on how knowledge constructor theory is considered to be a meta-theory of physics because it deals with how information generally behaves. It's not confined to our universe. We've encountered knowledge in the glider, and we then have properties of knowledge. Knowledge is hard to vary and hard to come by. The example is that only a subset of 3x3 grids will propagate whenever they interact with the game of life. The majority of grids will cease to propagate. This is the example. These are the knowledge. These are not knowledge. The Knowledge is parochial and fallible. Deutsch supports Israel, for example. Any knowledge fails to propagate upon interaction with an infinite subset of the infinite set of possible information structures. The glider is destroyed when it interacts with the eater, or when the game of life rules are varied. Fallibility is expressed formally in computer science by the no free lunch theorem, which states that no algorithm has universal superior performance across the space of all problems. That's potentially like a problem is defined parochially with respect to some knowledge as any structure that some knowledge will not constitute information when it interacts with it. So it will be destroyed. A problem is something that will destroy some knowledge. Deutsch talks about this in the beginning of Infinity, where he makes two key principles. Problems are inevitable. Any structure fails to propagate when it interacts with some other structure that may exist. And all problems are soluble. Any structure that is encountered is similarly fallible. Therefore, you can evolve some knowledge that will cause its destruction, and it will no longer be a problem. Constructors are some structures that embodies knowledge. The repertoire of a constructor is the set of transformations it can cause in an environment. The repertoire of this eater is the destruction of the glider, amongst other things. The platinum interacts to cause this interaction and returns to its form. It is a constructor. This notation represents a constructor being recreated in the output. Then the function game of life is not a constructor in the output grid. It is only a constructor when it interacts with computer memory that stores the function. All properties of knowledge are properties of constructors, and constructors have possible and impossible transformations. A constructor cannot raise a bucket in a gravitational field and then return to the same form because of conservation of energy. By that logic, perpetual motion and alchemy are impossible because no constructor can exist in reality to cause that transformation. It is impossible. A replicator is a constructor that can cause the transformation of creating a copy of itself in some environment. An example is shown here. This structure causes a copy of itself to exist every 12 iterations. Or not really, but anyway. Replicators are a subset of constructors that are a subset of information in some environment. It's always parochial. Replicators have all the properties of constructors, and they embody a program for creating a copy of themselves in some environment. Why replicators are fascinating is because they can experience evolution and come to embody significant knowledge. Evolution is where information can be copied, varied, and selected. This results in knowledge that is optimized for this selection criteria or this environment. Properties of evolutionary replicators: they can create a copy of themselves in the environment. That was posited by von Neumann, which led him to predict the existence of DNA in organisms. Then they can also create a phenotype. So replicators, in order to propagate through time and cause replicants of themselves, they must interact to do that. What they typically do is create a phenotype. This is some structure that causes them to propagate and gains them resources for creating replicants. The example was a butterfly, where the embryo interacts with the gene to cause the form of the butterfly. Evolution of replicators is shown. This butterfly that has evolved darker skin tones than the parents is selected. It has a genome that was created during sexual reproduction of the butterflies, and then that involves the genes being split up. So there is no mutation of the gene at that point. That's the gene is a single unit of hereditary. The genome is spliced up and many variant genomes are created. That allows evolution to happen. Universal Darwinism is the concept that, essentially from constructor theory, that propagation of knowledge and its embodiment on replicators and the causal influence of replicators is what defines the form of many abstract systems. The example we've just considered is of genes. We could also consider memes. Genes cause the evolution of brains. Brains can process information. That information can be copied, varied, and selected, which results in memes, the abstract replicators that exist in your brain. Dawkins called them memes after the word mime. That is because memes propagate by creating a behavior, causing humans, the neurons in your brain representing the meme, to interact with your muscles in some way that causes transformation, like a thumbs up. If I make a thumbs up and you see it, you have created the abstract object in your brain of a thumbs up. That's what allowed me in my brain to generate the symbol. Therefore, the meme has copied itself into your brain. If you choose to enact it, that is its phenotype, and it will propagate that way. Temes are called by Susan Blackmore technological, and then "-ing", the suffix, refers to evolution or replicator. Temes are, again, abstract structures that exist in the substrate of digital processing systems. They can copy, vary, and select, therefore replicators evolve. They interact to cause the form of your phone. That is their phenotype. All replicators in reality embody error correction codes. Error correction mechanisms. The codes were found by Hammond in the 50s after their possibility was discovered by Shannon. Hammond invented these so that you could send a message using digital bits, and it could be arbitrarily high accuracy because you could attach redundant bits to correct bit flips on the original message. These are codes, Hammond codes. Mimetic evolution has error correcting mechanisms in. He is a doctor that is respected for his work. There is 2 references to the gender. So even if you miss it the first time, you can correct the error in the message and still form the meme. Another example is in the degeneracy of the genetic code. We then have this perspective on reality. 4 billion years ago, genes evolved, they interacted to create squid and humans. Memes, the Statue of Liberty, and philosophy. Temes, Facebook. We then have this conjecture in reality. Not really doing it for me. conjecture in this paper is that evolution is some system with these two properties. Information interacts and information exists. That information exists and information interaction is Turing complete. Because the reality that existed at the Big Bang. Fundamental replicating information structures, Femes, existed in this reality.
Sad movies make me cry.
As replicators, Femes have propagated and replicated through time and space and exist in our current reality. The repertoire of Femes is the theory of everything. The theory of everything is a repertoire of these Femes that interacts to cause some transformation in the environment. General relativity and quantum mechanics are numerically reducible portions of this reality. This is the perspective we then gain from reality. Same as before, except 14 billion years ago, things existed and caused inflation, and planets and stars and atoms. What are the predictions from this? Femes embody error correcting codes.
Wish I could rewind and reverse time. This movie with you.
Emotions too.
I don't know whether there is.
Early on in the
Yes,
development,
there is. The craziest thing about
a particular beautiful property that stands out to you about these objects that you just find.
yes,
I mean, they're very
there
early
is.
on in the
Yes,
development.
there is. The craziest thing about these to me is that when you look at physics and try to write equations where information gets transmitted reliably, if you're in one of these supersymmetrical systems with this extra symmetry, that doesn't happen unless there's an error correcting code present. So it's as if the universe says you don't retransmit information unless there's something about an error correcting code. This to me is the craziest thing that I've ever personally encountered in my research. And it's actually got me to wondering how this could come about, because the only place in nature that we know about error correcting codes is genetics. And in genetics, we think it was evolution that causes error correcting codes to be in genomes. And so does that mean that there was some kind of form of evolution acting on the mathematical laws of the physics of our universe? This is a very bizarre and strange idea, and something I've wondered about from time to time since making these discoveries.
Do you think such an idea could be fundamental, or is it emergent throughout all the different kinds of?
It is emergent. So, certain formulations of supersymmetry require doubly even these type of Hamming codes. And this is also a more general property of supersymmetrical systems than many of the predictions that have not been verified. So, another prediction from this work is that Femes embody a program for causing a copy of themselves in some environment. This lends itself to experimental validation, because if a theme exists in an environment and then a theme causes another copy of itself to also exist in that environment, the future environment will have different properties when it interacts, because it contains two themes, not one. So it lends itself to experiments, because we can interact and determine if there is a difference. Femes are fallible, so heat death will not occur. Heat death is what happens when you run the laws of physics for eternity. That was previously considered to be ensured because the laws of physics were immutable. But this work proposes that they are embodied by fallible Femes, and therefore heat death is not guaranteed. Femes are information efficient, meaning that formulations of reality that require significant volumes of computation, such as the many words interpretation, are less likely to be correct. Selection for efficiency is typically done by evolution and would be supported by the embodiment of error correcting codes. Fine-tuning results from the selection of knowledge. So this work suggests that things have a form that has been selected to facilitate the evolution of complex life. So where do we go from here? So we have a second paper that considers work like Melvin Vopson's work on infodynamics, and will aim to reframe entropy in terms of general information dynamics and support why it would not agree with the conclusion of a heat death. And then a third paper on the mechanisms of mutual selection between abstract replicators and how that impacts the hard problem of consciousness, and also resolves questions like why plugging in an iPhone resembles sex at some level. This is the perspective we now gain on reality. I'm not sure if that's your potential. Anyway, yeah, our aim. Yeah, this is the perspective we gain. There are 4 abstract replicators, not 3. This Feme interacts and embodies the theory of everything. It looks like it was Jadestone, Mr. Poon.